Hello everyone. On behalf of Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage INTACH and the INTACH Conservation Institutes, I extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, Deepshikha Khalsi, and everyone who has joined us for today's talk in the Conservation Insights 2020 lecture series. I'm Dr. Padma Rohila, Director ICI Delhi. Now to introduce our speaker, Deepshikha Kalsi is a textile conservator in private practice and founder of Textile Conservation Studio based in New Delhi, India. Following her 1999 graduation from the Chandigarh College of Arts, a bachelor's in fine arts, she earned a master's in art conservation from National Museum Institute, New Delhi, India in 2002. She started her career with INTACH and later moved on to set up an art conservation department for the Times of India group in Delhi to help manage their collection. Thereafter, she pursued to specialize in textile conservation and completed internships at the Victoria and Albert Museum in UK in 2011 and later in 2015, the Ebig Stiftung in Switzerland in 2017, and the CEITA course at Musée des Tissus in Lyon, France in 2018-19. Deepshikha is a member of the Indian Association for the Study and Conservation of Cultural Property, the International Council of Museums, the International Institute for Conservation of Historic and Artistic Works, and CIETA. She has received Nehru Trust, Bonita Trust, Charles Wallace Sumia Trust, and the Simon Digby Trust Fellowships to specialize in textile conservation. The title for today's talk is Lessons Learned Then and Now, Developing a Career in Textile Conservation in India. At the turn of this century, textiles in India were still primarily being treated from a painting conservator's perspective, seeking help from traditional darners when required. Recognizing the limitations of this approach, thus began the quest to learn with the help of internships at the Victoria and Albert Museum and the Ebig Stiftung, gave an in-depth experience and understandings that transformed the perspective and prepared for the subjective, objective decision makings with regards to conservation challenges faced in the field. This presentation will reflect on the lessons learned on this journey, their application in India, and the need to adapt materials and techniques, including creative solutions when special equipment is not readily available, and the importance of understanding that not all conservation methods are appropriate for India's climate, therefore making textile conservation more challenging. Thank you, Deepshikha, and a very warm welcome to you. Before I request Deepshikha to start her presentation, may I please request all of you to put your microphones on mute. The questions will be taken up right at the end of the presentation. Please use the chat facility to keep typing in the questions. We'll take them up. And thank you, Deepshikha. You may start with the presentation.
Thank you, Padma, for having me here. I mean, I started my career with INTACH, so it feels good to come back with INTACH. Thank you. So although, as we all know, that the Indian textile history that primarily begins with the Indus Valley civilization, but with finding of the cotton seeds and impressions of the fabrics in the strands of the cotton and silk being found in the copper bead. And if you look at the priest image on the right-hand side, it seems pretty evident that he's draped a kind of a shawl, and this is an excellent example of textiles that would have been there in that period. So it could be a woven, or it could be a resist tied or appliqued or embroidered. So this is something that we would never know. Needles have also been excavated from the site, but unfortunately today there are very few examples that are kind of found in the museums before the 17th century. And it's primarily because of the tropical climate of our country and our cultural beliefs and practices. And yeah, that's about it. And initially my knowledge was kind of limited to Indus Valley, and then there was the Fustat there for me. So what you see on the bottom left-hand side is an image of a Fustat fragment, and this is from the Vienna collection. And one of the first experience of textile conservation was learning to darn at the National Museum. And what you also see on the right-hand side is an image of a double weave brocaded patka. And this is a Mughal patka, which is unfortunately pasted on paper. So at VNA, my mentor was Elizabeth Ann, And she really mentored and curated my work program in a very exhaustive manner, and giving me a lot of opportunities to learn and interact with everyone in the studio, working alongside the entire team, covering many aspects of textile conservation. And it was amid these experts who freely shared their knowledge that the transformation happened. And Frances Hartog, she provided immense support, simplifying all the procedures and everything for me in a very objective manner. And entire team came forward and they shared their knowledge, and Susanna introduced me to conservation stitches. Frances kind of initiated me into dyeing practices and humidification and mounting of flat textiles and the washing processes. Katie kind of took care of the documentation skills. She helped me polish and enhance those. Kira taught me costume mounting, and then in the science lab also, they shared insights with regard to the scientific analysis that was being practiced. And furthermore, Elizabeth Ann also introduced me to the adhesives, and she kind of supervised all the treatments that were being carried out at that point of time. So this was a great experience for me because I was learning hands-on. Everything was hands-on, and that made a lot of difference. So here what I had done was, I'll just share the detail. So this is actually the detail of a bed head, wherein due to the presence of layers of paper underneath the appliqued kalamkari fragments, and this kalamkari is from 1640s and 50s. So one couldn't kind of do a stitch intervention because it would further damage the textile. And so one had to kind of use an adhesive treatment to kind of support this. And for this, what we had done was that we had cast a free film of Clusilgi, and this was this was transferred onto a dyed support, and then it was reactivated in situ. And for this one, this textile was my first textile, and I must tell you that I almost dyed 27 different shades of dyes for this particular textile. And as you can see here, on the top left hand side, you can see the losses that are there, and the bottom, I have already inserted the support fabric with the adhesive underneath the losses, and on the top right you can see after it's been reactivated in place that it just kind of sits in perfectly there. Also another example wherein one couldn't do the stitching. If you see here, there was this big gaping hole, and dyed another support fabric, inserted that, and there were these tiny bits of adhesive that was of the cast film that were cut and inserted and reactivated in place, and then it's just sitting there. So this was the only costume that was that needed mounting during my internship period at the VNA. And although we were wondering if a Western costume is really going to help me understand, but it did, because it was about the learning the entire process rather than just being fixated on what kind of costume. It was about the process, and it really came in handy in India later. And whatever I kind of learned in 2011, I was fortunate to go back in 2015 for the Fabric of India exhibition. And everything that I had learned before got deeply ingrained at this point of time. And this was a great experience again, because there was everybody in the team, in the entire studio. They've got people from almost, there were 13 people, I think, in the studio at that point of time. And they were all working on Indian textiles. So, and the textiles from the earliest period, from the 3rd century onwards, everybody was working on them. So this was a very, very comprehensive exposure, for multiple conservation treatments that I got at that point of time. So again, fitting, how do you kind of mount a female costume, so you don't get to see the layers underneath, but they've all been secured, so you don't get to see them on the exposed areas of the displayed costume. And again, this is Madhuri Dixit's lehenga. This was quite heavy, so we couldn't kind of mount it in a standing position. So a sitting mannequin was kind of customized for this one. And then we had mounted this. Now here what's happening is like these are the different humidification techniques that are happening for flattening out the folds or the creases. So somewhere it's like the hot steam or the cold steam, or using Gore-Tex, or just kind of putting some weight and easing it out. So, and also creating a humidity chamber to kind of help relax the fibers. So this was, again, you know, I mean, there were too many things happening, and one got to learn everything. And again, hands-on experience. And likewise, you see that the costumes that were being mounted, you know, they all had their own subjective needs. And here everybody is out mounting different costumes and in different techniques. None of them were similar, you know. So it was great fun. It was great fun. And also when you're kind of putting up the exhibition together, so this Fabric of India, it introduced me to the decision-making process, influencing the display of the textiles and the costumes with regard to the sizes, the embellishments, and the weaving techniques, and the weight of the textile that needs to be taken into consideration, and the objects that had to be kind of showcased hanging or on a roller or on different support mechanisms. So this was great. Furthermore, whatever I had learned at VNA, I kind of, after going to the Abig Stiftung, you know, it was a completely different experience, because at the VNA, it's very fast paced, you know, because they've got so many exhibitions happening throughout the year. So everybody's always working, and it's like coming into the studio working and it's going out, you know. But so at the VNA, where I had witnessed how to kind of work under pressure, handling multiple projects simultaneously to meet the deadlines, at the Abig Stiftung, every object was approached as an individual project, you know. And the pace of the work allowed time for analysis, for research. So I was really fortunate there to be mentored by Bettina Niekamp and Corinna Kensla. And it was here for the first time that I kind of learned how to look at the weave structures and to look at the warp and the weft, you know. And that it wasn't just kind of limited to the alignment, as to how much more it contributed. And the entire object is made out of, it's woven or handcrafted. So the warp and the weft are the kind of the soul of the object, you know. So this again was a great experience there. And I was kind of fortunate that Zenzi Tinku was there, and she conducted a very exhaustive workshop on adhesives there, the use of adhesives in textile conservation, so which was fabulous. And then there were senior conservators who were working and always open. Now at BNE, the washing that I had done was different from the washing process that happened at the Abig Stiftung. And it was like they would use the foam of the saponin, you know. And so therefore the handling and everything was pretty much different. So it was again a great learning experience and exposure. And from Abig Stiftung, I went on to Sieta to do, because now I got interested in learning about the weave structures and studying the historical textiles. So it was like, we've got Mary Ellen here, and she's a very senior person. She conducts this course every year there. So after having studied this and being there, I was very fortunate to come back and to be able to study and look at the Stein collection at the National Museum in India with Rahul Jain and Vinay Singh and Mr. Binoy Sahai, the curator for the Central Asian textiles. So again, it wouldn't have been possible without any of these steps missing in between, I would say. So now earlier, whereas I just knew about, say, the Indus Valley, and then I knew about the first time, but then now the gaps in between, they started kind of filling in there. So now I knew about, so I made friends at people at the Hermitage. There's a conservator there. And then she shared that they had this cotton shirt from 4th century BC, that one wasn't even aware of Indian origin. So, which was great. And then there are the Berenike textiles that are there from like 3rd, 4th century again. And then there's another from the 7th century in Lyon. So it's been great to kind of, so I'm still pursuing this, trying to understand more and learn more about our historical pieces, And in 2012, I planned to establish the private practice in textile conservation. And primarily because it allowed me to do more of hands-on work when you're on your own, and rather than being caught up in administrative work. And also because I wanted to have flexible working hours, because my daughter came along in 2012, so I had to kind of see that I could be there for her and do the work as well. The shortcoming of working privately, as we all know, is that you need to build up everything from a scratch. So it's been quite challenging, but it's been very fulfilling as well. So if you look at the tables, so they're very practical, very economical setup. The legs, they kind of come apart, and we can take off the tabletops and place them on the sides. And we've got trunks to kind of store the objects, and also the acid, we make our own acid-free boxes, or things are on rollers and trolleys and everything. So slowly and slowly, everything kind of came together, So these are kind of some of the problems that we've handled in the objects that have come into us for conservation. So these are all the images that we've taken in from the objects that came in. So as we know, I think India is a very diverse country, and we come across very diverse issues in textiles from all across. So primarily the kind of process that we follow is like, the first stage would be the documentation. Then we would go in for cleaning if required, and followed by flattening, dyeing, consolidation, reinforcement or support stitching, mounting and display, or storage. But there is no fixed this thing that it has to be followed in this order or carried out in this order, because there are times when you cannot clean a textile, and it needs support, because you can't even handle a textile before it can even be cleaned, So the stages, they kind of interchange, it's not like a fixed position of carrying out a treatment. So we start off with the general documentation, which is something that even the curatorial team would kind of carry out, looking at the museum numbers, from which collection it comes in, the location, the sublocation, and the giving away the object titles and artist and maker and design, noting down all the dimensions and the date and the general condition codes of the object, and we move on to then, sorry, just a sec. Then we move on to kind of looking at giving the brief description of the object, and what the provenance of the object is, what is the material construction. Now, this is something that I wasn't doing earlier, but after coming back from the ABIG and the theater, I was able to study the weave structures. So now this is something that we follow, that we kind of, just a sec, door close kar do, bahut awaaz hai. Sorry. So now we kind of make sure that we look at the weave structures of the objects, and what kind of construction, what are the various parts of the construction in the object, and the embellishment techniques and everything. And Yes, the present support system and the sub support system and the condition of the object, and we kind of map the condition of the object and propose the treatment and record, document the actual treatment that's been given. And what are the future guidelines to be followed, you know, when the object leaves the studio. So like when you've got an object on the table, so when we start looking at the weave structures, you know, so we document it in detail. Earlier, I was just aware of the plain weave or the satin or the trill weave. But then there are so many variations of these weaves itself. And if you look at the simple gara, you know, we've all heard about the Parsi gara. And I remember one time, there was this client who was talking about the Parsi Gara, and then he remarked that, Deepshikha, are you aware of the weave structure? And I was like, I haven't looked at it. And he said that I don't think it looks like the typical, you know, plain weave. It's something else. And then together we sat down and looked at it, and then it was like, oh, it's a lino weave, you know, what you see on the right hand side. So one was able to classify and put it in there, and perhaps we documented it for the first time here. And this is a simple lino, an example of a lino weave here on the left hand side. This is again from an imperial Chinese robe that we were conserving, that we've taken the images from. So we take time to kind of study the fibers and everything now. And after we've done that, we assess the condition of the object. The reason I've put in this white object here is because many times it's very difficult to kind of see the problems in document. But this friend of mine, Katie, that I was talking about, or sorry, this was Manuela from Switzerland. She came up with these triangles and the flags, you know, and it's great to, so it's these little nuggets also that kind of help you document and you know, put your documents together for the assessment wherever the problems are, because they might not be visible, but at least the moment you show pictures like that, and even if the object is going out and you tell them, so then they're more careful in handling also. So other general tools of examination that we look at, the magnifier is there, the pig glass and the thread counter, the dynolite microscope, the compound microscope, and yes, there are lots of other complex instruments. And for that, many times we need help from the conservation scientist also. Now cleaning, once we've documented, and if we need to kind of clean the object, it's not same for every object. You know, it was so wonderful listening to Julia last week, because she stressed again and again on the subjective needs of each and every object, you know, and which is the case, you know, and you come across different kinds of dirts, and even the reason for the dirt can be different for different things. Like what you see here is just kind of plain dirt. It's coming from the sand because it was in Gujarat. And what you see here is because of the slightly corrosive nature that was of the metals at the back, not so much here. And this one is from the fracas of the insects, you know, so you can then, we take in a smaller vacuum, and we just kind of vacuum them. And if we think that these are kind of delicate textiles, that we ensure that there's a small mesh in between. And cleaning can also happen for the textiles on display. So this is from the recent exhibition Prakashi that happened at the National Museum. So this is, while it was on display, it had to be made sure that we were kind of, you know, cleaning it once a week. It was taken care of. Initially when we started working with sponges, then we were working with these dirt sponges, and what we realized was that they would also tend to crumble. And now these are much finer ones, and these are latex free, and I've been getting them from Germany now. And they come in different density also. So, you know, they're much softer, slightly harder if you want. So these are all mechanical means of cleaning, you know, because even after vacuuming, there can be certain amount of dust. And if you think that you're not going to clean your textile through a solvent or a wet bath, and there's still some dirt, you might just want to lift the dirt from there. On the right is an example of solvent cleaning. So we had received this textile because of the stain here, and it was very visible from these outlines that somebody had previously tried to kind of clean it up and ended up with the tide line there. And then this came in to us. So then we did the solvent cleaning for this one. Again, what one has to ensure while cleaning is that the reason why you need to study your material, because then you know what you're handling. This is an image under the microscope of one of the the Chinese imperial robes that I was working on, and this is gold actually laminated on paper, you know. So and you can't use any kind of solvents. You won't want to introduce any kind of moisture. So if you're aware of the material of the object that you're handling, then your decisions would also be kind of accordingly. You will take your decisions, you know. Again, this I'm showing you, this was a painted textile that came in and it looked pretty dirty, but I still thought of looking at it under magnification, and one realized that there was hardly any ground, you know, and in between the creases, the paint was almost directly applied onto, or the ground was too thick, and it had kind of cracked as per the weave structure, as you can see, you know. So it just kind of cracked in there. And one could just very gently brush this, or with a very gentle pressure uh, with the latex cleaner, but you wouldn't want to kind of give it any harsh treatment there. And the one on the right hand side is the cover of a tanka. This was wet cleaned, and what one needs to kind of take care in the tanka covers is that many a times the green and the reds and the yellows on the top are fabric paints, you know. So you need to ensure that they are stable and they're not going to come out in your wash treatment. And also when how fast you need to dry and handle, and that if it's wet, you'll not put your hands on these areas. So things you need to take into consideration, and you can see the amount of dirt that came out of this cover. This is another example of wet cleaning, and this was done in summers. And the most challenging thing here was that we had to maintain the temperature of the wash bath, you know, and we used almost 130 kgs of ice that day to get the best results, because if we wouldn't have maintained the temperature, I mean, the detergent would have fallen off from the water, and it would have rather kind of got settled and ingrained there, and wouldn't have given us the kind of results that we were looking for. And what was easy for us to do the washing was that it was all white, so we were happy to wash it. But what was very challenging was that, again, the size of this garment, it was like 5,500 centimeters, about 55 meters, you know, overall. And we started at like 5:36 in the morning and finished at 2 in the night, because we couldn't leave any stage in between, because we had to ensure that it had dried also. And this jama, wherein it had small weaker areas, we supported it with Stabilitex. And as we all know that Stabilitex, you need to heat seal the Stabilitex, you know, even for cutting a patch, you need to kind of heat seal it. And the heat sealing instruments abroad are very expensive. And but thankfully we were able to kind of come up with a creative solution, and we used the soldering iron that's used for repairing mobile phones, and we heat sealed it with that, and it worked wonders. It was very great, and it just cost us 150 rupees to get the instrument. So I was very happy about this. So conservation stitching, as we all know, is very different because of its approach. And it's primarily, you know, you do it to give the structural support to the original fabric, and it has to be kind of as unobtrusive as possible. For the overall aesthetic, you can feel off the object and you don't wish to disturb the object there. And these are kind of some of the conservation stitches that are used in conservation of textiles. These are some of the examples of previous intervention that I've come across. Now, this is darning, and the sad part is that this shawl, this garment that we had come across, it was almost 80% of it was darned. And because of that, people were actually looking at these areas. They were still happy. I mean, this is under the microscope. So you can imagine that without the magnification, it still looks beautiful. But they missed out on the original. They actually missed out on the original. And that is one of the reasons why one feels that if it's not for personal use, if it's a historical piece, and if it's for a museum, one should kind of refrain from taking such invasive techniques, you know. Again, another darned object that we came across. Now, unless and until the darning stitches are, unless and until the fibers have been aligned and it's going into the stronger areas, it's not really serving its purpose, because then it's creating more weaker areas, it's creating more stress, you know, and because of it, you'll find more losses coming up. This was another object wherein I think it looks more like a Boro Textiles from the back, because every time there was something or the other, they've put in like one object, one patch over the other. And even to support the patches, they've put in patches, and I had to take these off, because in an area as small as about like 12 centimeter by 12 centimeter, there were like 30 patches there, and it was causing a lot of stress on the original object there. So this is about deciding whether you want to undo something or not undo something. But if you are looking at a longer shelf life of the object, then you have to take your decision accordingly. So we've been fortunate to have needles from abroad. So we've got very nice and fine curved needles. But we also realized that the pony needles, which is like number 12 and 13, the darning needles, you can actually curve them with your hand. So now whenever we have an object, and as per the kind of stitches that we are doing, as per the comfort level, we just kind of bend it, you know, because you know as to from where you want to take your needle out. So these needles are fixed, but these are not. So you can guide them, and they give you more even stitches then. Like if you look at these bends here, you know, whether I want it out of after like 2-3 warps, or whether I want after four warps or 6 warps, it gives you a more even stitching, you know. That's what we've realized, and we are very happy doing that. And thankfully, we've got lots of Scala and Mara, and we were fortunate to buy some Stabiltex before it went out of production. So we do use some Stabiltex threads very sparingly. And so we've created a file for ourselves, you know, and so this is one of the examples of one of the pages, our textile pages in that file. So this is the Laden couching stitch. This is the most used stitch to support the textiles, the weaker textiles in textile conservation. And each stitch has been done 4 times. So it's like 1, 2, and then there's here 3, and then there's 4. The reason we've done it like this is to highlight that when you're using an appropriate color thread, you know, how it just kind of blends in, and you don't really need to use very thick threads and all. So I can see the stitch lines here. I hope you can see them as well. That's why we even pointed them out, and this is under magnification. You can see this line going here, you know. So depending upon the kind of object, we just use threads accordingly. Now, when you have to kind of support a textile, so and support the weaker areas, you also look at, you need to align your areas of loss, you know. So this is a close-up of one of the shoulders of the Chinese robe that we did. And so this is how it was, and thread by thread. Thankfully, because of the embroidery, the threads were there. It's the embroidery that held the threads together. And we were able to kind of align them. And after aligning them, we kind of flattened them in place with Gore-Tex. And then you can see the extensive Laden couching that has gone in there to hold these stitches there. So this is again stabilizing them with that. Stabilization can also be of loose threads, I mean, of the surface decoration. So there's so many different kinds of problems that you come across. And so these were just kind of held and couched back in place. The types of support wherein you're not just doing, where you need to provide a fabric support to your textile. So it can be from underneath, it can be an overlay on the top, and it can be sandwiched both from the top and from the bottom. This is an overlay. So in the pink and in the blue, there's a blue dyed net and a pink dyed net. So this is a case of where, and if you've dyed your fabric well and you've done an overlay, so it's not that visible, you know. We dye our textiles and thankfully in India, I mean, you can customize things if you know what you want. There are people who are there to kind of make things for you. So we also got this bulk dyeing machine made for us, and this is a smaller machine wherein we do our dyeing. So we're able to do that. So this is an example for a embroidered pitchway, again for an 18th century work. So you can see the losses. We did the dye charts and matched it. Again, you need to kind of align the losses before you undertake any further step, you know. You need to align them, flatten them, hold them in place, dye your supports, and then do the conservation stitches. Again, you can see the examples. So in this case, some threads were still attached, so we actually inserted the textile underneath, you know. We dyed a black textile, we inserted it underneath, and then it was couched down there. Again, when you are doing your conservation stitches and it's a costume, you know, everything is not flat, then you need to kind of support your object. Supporting your object is also very important, you know. So this was an umbrella. As you can see, it was in a very, very bad state. So we casted a paper pulp umbrella support, you know, onto which then we could kind of put it on the top, and we started flattening out. This is using Gore-Tex to kind of humidify and ease out. And as you can see, then they started coming closer together. And this is when we wanted to work on the inside. We just turned our support inside out, and then we worked on the inner area. So every time you can't do, if the textile is too weak, you can't introduce needles, then you also opt for adhesive support. This was a textile, and we just had like 1 week for this textile. It had to go for an international exhibition, and but it had huge losses, you know, it was very fragile, and it had to go to Japan for an exhibition. So we advised the museum there that to keep it flat on display, and they agreed to do that. And then we introduced an adhesive support in there. This is woven ivory, you know, again, a very, very delicate material to handle. And these are very fine pieces of cast Clusil film that we've used there to support it in place. Again, another, as we're all familiar with using the wheat starch paste for supporting our tankas. Quickly sharing a small this thing as to if there's an object. So you can see that it had almost all kinds of problems in place. So taking the measurements and condition mapping, and kind of taking note of the various parts of construction that were there. What was interesting was that if you look at the collar here, so this is again crucial to decision making. So if you have experienced, and if you feel that this was a later edition, it seemed like this was a later edition. And then we spoke with the curator and we took permission to kind of undo this bit, And the curator agreed to do that. And because this was again in a very fragile condition. And as you can see, this is what it was. And underneath that, we came across the original label of the coat. So this frock coat, it belonged to Maharaja Savai Man Singh, and it was also worn by Maharaja Bhavani Singh of Jaipur. And these were very fragile. We could not stitch. So here we did an overlay of dyed silk crepeline, and they're just kind of sitting encapsulated in there. We also do an after conservation documentation, wherein we mark all the areas that have been conserved, so that one look at the sheet and one knows what was done at where. Once you've prepared your textiles, you've conserved them, then they need to be displayed, and then there are various kinds of mounts on which they are kind of displayed. So this is like creating a mannequin because it was a beautifully tailored coat and it would have looked very nice on a mannequin. So we customized the mannequin support. So this is how it was before, and this is how it was after conservation on display on the mannequin. And again, if you look at the mounts, it's not necessarily that you'll just come across a human mannequin kind of mount. It can even be an elephant trapping. And then you need to kind of support the losses accordingly. Here we were again very fortunate, and what we did was that usually the tradition is that the frills that are there, the fringes that are there on the edges, usually they're taken off. You don't come across too many elephant trappings with the fringes there because they're mostly damaged. But what we did is that we created a lace, we made a lace, and we supported the original onto that, so on the weaker. So this was just like an underlayer, and the original was supported on there. So they stayed in situ there. And even wherever the ribbon was kind of, the band was missing at the edges, we created that band, and we left a very clear demarcation of where what began, Yeah, just taking care of losses with the dyed support. And again, after conservation documentation, both of the front and the back. So this is at the back as to how many patches and losses were there. And the one on the right is from the front. And it clearly indicates where the original is and where it's been supported on the other fringe, It says there are 160 places where it's been kind of supported. And there are 329 tassels that were added on the edges, on the fringes. And then again, packing for travel, once it's been conserved, it needs to go back. And if you've got 2-3 of them, you don't want them lying on one on top of the other in transportation. How do you kind of plan and curate that? So here there were 3 of them, and you can see that they are not touching each other. The support mechanism has been planned as such. Again, this had to travel internationally to a museum in US, and so it's been properly rolled onto the roller, and you can see this is a silk cushion that we've created. So it's further rolled in the silk cushion. There it's where the edge of the roller, the extended edge, goes and sits in there. And we even wrote a manual for custom people to handle it so that they would know how to lift it out. We kept gloves for them. We kept extra Melanex rolled sheets for them, that if the customs had to take it out and kind of see. So we took care of all those things, so that the textile, they won't open it on the floor. They won't open it with dirty hands or anything. So you see, so there were complete instructions as to how it needs to be handled, if they need to open it up. Again, I mean, if they're costumes, how you kind of support them in between for travel. So they're all subjective, I mean, the person was taking himself in his hand in the plane. So this is a more comfortable one. And again, not just for the 3D mounts, it can be anything. So this is the footwear, and we created the 3D mount in there. We dyed the fabric and created the mount. And then it kind of sat nicely in there. And this belonged to the Princess of Bikaner at one point of time. So this has been again cleaned and mounted for the museum. Again, I mean, the costume need not be on a mannequin. It can even be flatter. So there are more flatter options as well. So this is from one of the recent exhibitions in Prakashi, where the board was kind of kept at an inclination and it was allowed to rest there. These are on T-bars, but again, we've supported the angles from in between. And with magnets, they're just sitting there. So again, they're draped on half mannequins. These are on rollers. This has been kept flat. This has been slanted. This is just held in place with the magnets, you know, and we covered the magnets in a similar dyed fabric. It's on a cascading because it was very, very long textile and we wanted people to get that feel that how long it was. So it was on a cascading rollers, you know. And again, if you're kind of framing your textiles, so we've realized that the museum quality, you know, true view works best. So this is the museum quality true view glass hair. You can see the edge of the glass hair, but you can rarely feel its presence. But then there's a glass and acrylic on the either sides. And again, if you're mounting flat textiles, so how you prepare your mounts for a flat textile, and if you look at the edge, you know, how you kind of align the warp and the weft so that it's perfect there. Because if you align the warp and the wefts on your boards, then when you are kind of stitching your flat textile there, and you can align it so much better with its warp and weft. That really helps you. This was interesting because of the experience in paper, I was able to look for this kind of solution wherein we used creplin threads to hold the stamps in place because we created the textile mounts and there's just one creplin thread going from hair to hair and from hair to hair, and the result was very nice. Again, creating mounting using threads and creating a textile mount to support the invitation cards and the penny blank stamp. So it was all possible because of the exposure to both the fields, say for the paper conservation and the textile conservation, you know, that one was able to look at it. So these are the kind of objects that we come across. These have been conserved in the studio. So it's an imperial Chinese robe, it's a fan, and that's a fly whisk, a jacket with a cap, and that's a patola. Again, another form of jacket, a painted textile, that's a fusta, that's an apulet. So there's a wide range of materials that one comes across. Some of the recent projects that we worked on. So the Fabric of India, the Passionate Eye at the National Museum, and Bizarre Silks at the Abbott Stiftung, Prakashi that happened recently at the National Museum. This was mounting the textiles that belonged to Mrs. Indira Gandhi. And this is at the Jaigarh Fort in Jaipur, Amrapali Museum, Jaipur. This was the Nizam's stamps exhibition that happened at the Bikaner House. So what was nice was that after all this experience, life almost came 360 degrees. I started off my first training when Linda came to conduct the training for Sutra in 2010. And then in 2018, I was fortunate to conduct the workshop with Linda at the Indian Museum in Kolkata. And again, we are kind of introducing the concept of textile conservation and how to create a mount or the general handling. If there are crowds, how you transport an object, how you take it from one place to the other, or how to humidify gently, creating a mount, you know, and even assessing the condition of the objects on display and what they think should be, we should be doing, you know, and they could make the recommendations after that. This is another workshop that we conducted at the registry of saris in Bangalore, and I was very happy because they actually followed everything to the T. You know, if we said that it has to be a slow thing for the learning, They said we'll do it just for 1 week, just focus on the documentation. And I must say that they've learned it so well that they can now conduct a documentation workshop, I think, for other people in their area. They can easily do that. So, so it's like, I haven't done this. They've sent it after I left. They've been assessing their collection and they've been sharing documents, And this was great because we did a lot of exercise of making rollers and bales for the storage. And I think it's a great exercise for building team spirit also, because it's not the one person job. Many a times if you have a perfectly fitting fabric on your rollers and the bales, you need people to pull and help you, and as you can see, it's like 3 people here and 2 people there, and you actually need at times that kind of help. It depends upon how nicely snug and fitted it is on the rollers and the bales. And again, once you've kind of learned how to handle, an individual person can also then start doing, but that's the thing. So it's like practicing, and then we also did a lot of research. So we customized a special form for them pertaining to their collection, and they've been doing a fab job with that now. Coming back to, okay, I'll not name the museum, but these are Peruvian textiles that were recently on display at the museum. And it was sad, to see the woolly bears walking on the textiles and having fun while on display in the frames. So, yeah. So, but I've been collecting insects from the various collections that we come across. This is also a sad reality that's there, but yes, now I mean there are lots of individuals who are coming forward and working in the field. So scene is changing. It's not that it's not changing, it is changing. But the truth of the matter is that there's still a lot of darners working with the museum instead of the professional conservators in the museums. And I feel that they've kept our heritage in place. I mean, the Danas, hats off to them. Had they not kind of mended and done things, what they did, we wouldn't have those fragments, the tiny, tiny fragments and the pieces there. They wouldn't be alive. But probably now there's a need to kind of demarcate and take the field forward as to, what needs to be handled and done how, and maybe your household textiles and everyday wear textiles, they certainly need to be done. But maybe for the museum quality textiles, it's a bit too invasive, and one is concerned about the handling and everything. So yeah, I mean, this is a question that's there. And yes, I would like to express my thanks to the VNA and the team at the ABEG, and Frances, she's my guru, and Elizabeth Ann, she's always been there, and Joanne, and then Dr. Regula Shorta, and Bettina, and Corina, and Manuela, and Mary Ellen from Theatre. They've been like, I have no words, I'm speechless there. And back in India, I would say Giri Kumar has been my mentor since the beginning, and he's always been there, always been there. And it's such a pleasure to learn from Rahul. It's again, I'm speechless there. And I'm extremely grateful to Pramod and Deepthi and the EKA team, working on their projects. It's been one of the finest experiences here. So, and I'm glad for the kind of work that they do. And again, Lekha Podar and Devi Art Foundation, and Maharaj Harshvardhan Singh and his wife Priyadarshini ji from Dungapur, and Princess Diya Kumari, and Dr. Giles Tillotson and Mrinalini from Jaipur, and the Jaigar Public Charitable Trust, and Dr. Binoy Sahai from the National Museum, Mr. Bharani, Amrita, the Sutra Indian Museum, Linda, Rosemary, Divya, Avalon, Richard, and the Registry of Saris, and my team at the Textile Conservation Studio. It's been phenomenal working with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepshikha. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So we have questions, which I think you want. I'll start with those. If you're ready. The first
Okay.
question is, what were the reagents used for solvent cleaning?
Now this is something, I don't mind sharing. Okay, for this one, it was I think toluene worked very well for this one. But the thing is that you need to be sure of your material. It's not a copy paste solution. It's not a copy paste solution. So this is one thing I need to make very clear. Please don't follow anything blindly. So unless and until you know your material, you know that your textile is not going to dissolve, or the dye is not going to kind of just spread. So there are lots of things, and how much can you apply, your application, the kind of pressure. So there are lots of other factors that are also there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is, lot of wet clean textiles, especially Mughal textiles, are water cleaned or wet cleaned in certain collections, sometimes as are muslin and silks. Now, this leaves a permanent water stain on top of adding to the fragility of the textile. So what could be done now to salvage such textiles that have already suffered from previous unscientific conservation practices in the past? What can be done now to salvage them?
One can look at them again and see whether it would be useful to wash them again, or whether they cannot be washed. So without looking at them, one cannot comment. One actually needs to see them in person to kind of see what can be done. Because if it's, one can see whether they can be cleaned again or washed again. That's a possibility too. But if it's a sensitive colors or something is there and you can't wash it, then you'll probably leave it as is. Or maybe you'll just try and clean uh, the tidal marks, so that it reduces the stain there. Yeah.
Any possible side effects of using Stabilitex for supporting the textiles under treatment? Did you come across any side effects since you've been using it? That's the question.
No side effects.
No, that's good. Uh, so next question is, what can be the best possible method to clean embroidered cloth work such as the chamba rumals or the fulkari?
You need to see whether the thread that's been used on the chamba rumal, if the dye is not soluble, then maybe you can wash it. Yeah. Or you can use partial gel cleaning methods on that. You can even do that. Or depending upon, one can even try and use cyclododecane on the threads and then kind of clean the areas around. So there are lots of possibilities there. So you just need to see what's good for which particular object.
Thank you. The next question is, which company or brand of dyes do you use for dyeing your silk crepely?
Huntsman is the company that produces the Lana Set and the Novacron dyes. And I've been using the Lana Set dyes for the protein-based and synthetic-based materials, like for the silks and for the synthetic net. So I would use Lana Set. And Novacron is used for your cellulose-based textiles. So if I have to dye cotton or linen, then I would use a Novacron.
Okay. Kanika, do you want to come in? The question, was it clear? You said you would want to reframe your question. So do you want to ask the question again? Maybe I wasn't clear.
Yeah. Hi, Padma. Hi, Deepshikha. Very impressed with your presentation. Wonderful work. Yeah, I typed the question later. So I just want to know, no intentions of getting the trade secrets out. Just wanted to know that what are the preferable medium? Is it the aqueous-based solvents or the organic solvents or enzymes, because very few people have been doing wet cleaning.
See, I'll tell you for wet cleaning, what I have used is I've also used saponin, and I've also used D-hyphon LS 45 and 54. 45 was used earlier and then they upgraded to 54 because in 54 you can work at the temperature of up to 30 degrees. In D-hyphon LS 45, I think you need to maintain about 18 degrees temperature, yeah, of the water. But what is important is the amount of this thing that you are introducing, you need to calculate the dye bath area.
Right.
And then you introduce the amount of detergent as per the area.
Okay.
So it's not random,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. That answers my question.
Yeah, thanks, Kanika. Thanks, Deepshikha. Are the class of dyes identified before any kind of treatment?
I would love to do that, but I don't have the equipment to do that. So no, but yes, what I do is I see whether they are fugitive or not, and how they will respond to a particular treatment. That is something I always take into consideration, but for sure.
Maybe the next time when you go out, that's something to be, training in classification of dyes.
No, but the thing is, who's going to do it here for me, Padma? It costs a lot of, money.
Thank you. The next question is slightly different. It's asking about, thank you for such a comprehensive presentation. What consideration should people take before establishing their own conservation studio? How should one establish their presence in the field to ensure client base for a new person starting in the field? That perhaps is your entire experience to be shared to encourage more people. So that is the question.
I've actually shared the entire journey with you today, and very frankly, it's more from the word of mouth. Once you've conserved one textile well, and they're happy with the work done, so it's through the word of mouth. That's always what's worked for me. It's one referring to the other. At times, even you won't know the person, but because whose work you've done, and then they've discussed the work, and that's how the person has come to you. The only time I advertised was in the IASC journal, and nothing came from any of the museums. So I'm not sure about the advertising fact. But yes, I think what's also important I've realized now is to have a general presence of the kind of work that you do. And that's one of the reasons I still go to Instagram and I've got a page there and keep updating in between, just sharing posts, So it's just having a general presence. Yeah.
Thank you. What was the most challenging textile you have conserved so far? Next question.
Okay. So I would say that there were two. One was the first one that I worked on, wherein I had to dye the 27 different shades of dyes. And because I worked in an adhesive treatment and I had to cast a free film of the adhesive treatment. So it was like a great learning experience for me then. And the second one was an imperial Chinese robe that we conserved recently, because it took us like, for 3 people, it took like more than a year to complete that. And it was in a very, very delicate condition. But we were very happy that we were able to put it back together, So,
Thank you.
yeah. So these two, I would say they've been the most challenging.
Okay. The next question is, how do you manage climatic conditions in India, particularly in the rainy season?
It's like there's no way, because even in the museums, even in the collections, wherever they are not into climatic conditions. But what you can ensure is that the kind of buffering that you have in your place, you're not allowing the air to kind of interact that much. And but at the same time, you're also allowing for some amount of ventilation so that there's no stagnant air in. And you have lots of layers of, the curtains, because they also kind of tend to absorb the humidity that comes in from the window, if at all. I've sealed all my windows and everything. That's another thing that I've done, because I don't want that kind of interaction happening.
Thank you.
Yeah, otherwise, having a dehumidifier, that's something that I have not invested in yet, but I always advise my clients on doing that because they have huge collection. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is it possible to read about all the textiles you have conserved so far, before and after conditions somewhere?
I haven't sat down and written the reports. I've got all of them in bits and pieces. This is something that I will do sometime, but it eats up so much of your time, the documentation process, that we've realized that for some people, I don't do the documentation, I charge less. Okay. Because then you're not doing spending that many hours. Otherwise, if you sit and document an object properly, it can take you up to like 3-4 days easily, and that's a lot of your time.
Yes.
So yeah.
Any other questions? I don't see any here. So okay, the next question: how hard has it been to establish yourself as a textile conservator in India? Probably the challenges that you faced is that question.
Okay, thankfully I feel blessed that I went from one step to the next, and this just happened. But I think I was always very persistent that I wanted to do this. And like even now, I know what I want to learn further, kind of thing. So the kind of things that you want to go into. But it's always been challenging that once you've been away from the country for almost 6 months, like for all my internships, I've gone for like 5-6 months. So when you come back to again pick up your practice, because when you've been away, the clients also go away. So to come back again, and then it takes you about like 5-6 months. It does do that, to come back into your practice, unless and until there's an exhibition or a project like that. Eka has been very, very supportive for me, So yeah, so I'm very grateful to Eka for always kind of having me on their projects. That's helped me a lot. So they've given me the kind of freedom that to work, the way you would want to work also. That makes a lot of difference. So yeah.
Thank you, Deepshikha. Any more questions? I don't see any in the chat box.
Okay.
Taken up most of them. So I think that's that. Thank you, Deepshikha. Thank you very much for agreeing. And I know it was quite a short notice from my side, and you were really up to the challenge and a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you everyone for joining us and being there to support this this lecture series in textiles. So see you all. Thank you. Bye. Bye, Deepshikha.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.